Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to Pilgrim United Church of Christ, where we like to say, whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are most certainly welcomed here. Tonight, you know, you've come to our series. This is our first Tuesday night in our series on the faith and the marriage amendment. And you know, our speaker tonight, who I'll introduce soon, is Sharon Thompson. I want to remind you that the series will continue for 3 more Tuesday evenings, same time, same place, and that next Tuesday evening we have as our speaker Mary McClintock Fulkerson, who is a professor at Duke Divinity School, speaking on perspectives from the faith and theology on marriage amendment. And then we will follow that with a program of hearing from a panel of people who will likely be most directly affected by the amendment. And then finally on the last week, which will be the 27th of March, we will have a program on what can we do about this amendment. And we will have speakers both from the Protect All North Carolina Families Coalition and from the North Carolina Council of Churches. So we hope you will join us for those programs as well. Tonight, though, we are focusing on the legal perspectives on the marriage amendment, and we are honored to have as our speaker Sharon Thompson, who is a local Durham attorney. She founded her practice that eventually became her current law firm, the Sharon Thompson Law Group, in 1976. She's been with us quite a while. She's a seasoned family law and family lawyer, and accomplished practitioner in all aspects of estate planning and probate administration, including elder law. She's taught at both UNC Chapel Hill and at North Carolina Central Schools of Law. She's received a number of awards through the years, and I thought you'd like to know the variety of different groups that have recognized her. The North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys gave her their annual award, which she helped found that organization many years ago, probably back in the 70s as well. Is that right? And but also the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the AFL-CIO. So you can see the breadth of her recognition. So please join me in welcoming Sharon Thompson. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Great to see so many friends, clients, and folks I don't know and hope to get to know. When I was thinking about preparing for this talk tonight, the words from Alice in Wonderland kept coming to mind, curiouser and curiouser, and sort of like the more you look at this amendment and what's behind it and what the implications are, it just gets stranger and stranger, and unfortunately not in a good, fun Alice in Wonderland way. So I appreciate being able to come here, even though it's to talk about what this dreadful issue that brings us together. But it is exciting to see the support and the recognition of the mean-spiritedness of this amendment. And I think I acknowledge we're in a little bubble here in Durham. I mean, I love right now driving the bike down Club Boulevard. I mean, you know, it seems to be more houses with signs against the amendment than vacant houses. And I have this image that in 2 months, by May, every house on Club might have it. And I like driving around my neighborhood. It's like, oh, I didn't know they would be so supportive. You know, it's just been really fun to see as the signs are going up just everywhere. And I was also thinking today, has anybody seen a sign against it yet in Durham? At least, I was like, yay. So
you mean for it?
For it. I mean, yeah, excuse me, for it.
One of the curious.
So I assume by your attendance here that you want to know the facts, such as the legal implication of this amendment, so that you can intelligently and accurately have some persuasive conversations with others about the amendment. So my goal here is to give you pertinent information, a framework to look at the legal issues, and to impart what I see as the most significant legal damage that could occur if this amendment passes. So but in my determination to be a lawyer and just give you the facts, ma'am, as they said in Dragon, I did get a little sidetracked by going to the Family Policy Council website just to see sort of what they had to say and what their issues are in terms of this amendment. And of course, although it, most of it sort of made my blood boil and all that, like it would for any of you, I actually started, well, wholeheartedly agreeing with many of their talking points, and I agreed with them because, in my mind, they were nothing more than reasons to support the inclusion of same-sex couples in marriage, because they were talking about how wonderful marriage is, and just like to maybe quote a few things, because I think it really puts it in perspective, and this is their talking points, is that marriage is foundational and that it is privileged through law because it creates the best and safest environment for raising children. Well, then great, then so every child should have. And that of the benefits of marriage that they recognize are increased family wealth, less poverty, especially for women, better health and longer life expectancies, especially for men, lower rates of depression, especially for women, less risk of domestic violence, especially for women, and better relationships with children, especially for fathers. So again, I mean, I thought, fine, great, I can buy into all those, except for maybe the ways they say who it impacts the most, but certainly, again, another argument what the benefits of marriage are and should be extended to everyone. They also say that that this amendment is not about discrimination, it's about preservation, and that it is just preserving the universal institution that for thousands of years has brought men and women together to create the safest environment, again, for raising children. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that concept of marriage has not changed in thousands of years. And then into their answers to common questions that about this amendment is what's the harm from same-sex marriage as a question, and their answer is that it harms each and every North Carolinian first and foremost by changing the historic definition of marriage from a public institution that is based on the needs of children and society to one that is based on the desires of adults. And so somehow, if you're a same-sex couple, you're only thinking of yourself and not your children. But, and I also think there is this basic assumption that straight people get married to procreate, and that's the only reason they're getting married. And obviously, well, no, people don't marry just for that reason, nor when you go down to get your marriage license, there's not a check there, do you intend to procreate, as a reason for you, as your goal for getting married. So I think, and that whole argument has been really now handled by the courts very well, particularly cases in California showing that that's not a basis for categorizing who can get married and who not, on the assumption that just straight people are going to have children if they get married, and that all straight people who are going to get married are going to have children. Which leads, and then the next talking point they have is, why do you want to interfere with love, and what should they respond to that? Isn't that what marriage is all about? And they say love is a great thing, but marriage is not only about love, it is an exclusive institution, duh, it is about binding together a man and a woman in a complementary union that creates the best environment for having and raising children. And actually, since this argument has not been bought by the courts, they're having to switch. And I was reading an article recently where the new theory they're coming out with now that the procreation children thing hasn't worked is really going back to somewhat of also religious-based one of that it is good for for marriage helps, stabilize people. It helps keeps men in check and helps have women that can stabilize men. And it's, in one sense, you can't believe that these kind of sexist arguments are now they think that's their next best chance to win. But then after the events of the last couple of weeks in terms of women's health issues and all that, maybe unfortunately sexism is a little bit on the rise at the moment. So that's, sorry that I digressed, I just had to put a little perspective in with what we're dealing with. But to turn a little bit more to some facts and some talking points that we might all have First is that this amendment is about so much more than gay marriage. I would say that the gay marriage aspect of this amendment is just one slice of the pie. That is just really a smaller aspect of what the effect of this amendment could be. Starting with the fact that 90% of the people who are going to be affected by this amendment are unmarried, straight, heterosexual couples. This because the statistics of that in this state, there are 186,000 cohabitating unmarried couples in North Carolina, and of that, the standard only 10% are same-sex. So that leaving the rest of the 90% of that 186,000 who are going to be affected by this amendment and the prohibitions under this amendment. One other, just for you who like statistics, there were, under the last census, 27,250 people self-reported as living in a household with adults of the same sex. So that's the numbers we're talking about in North Carolina. So again, showing that there's more about straight couples. So that why it's so little about gay marriage is because what the bigger impact of this is that it is denying the basic legal rights to a very significant group of citizens. My soundbite would be that this amendment would prohibit all unmarried couples, gay or straight, and their families from creating legal protections for themselves. It would not only say you can't get married, it says you cannot protect yourself in the many, many ways that I'll talk about. Before we get to the real legal facts, the one other myth I would love to dispel is that, as the Family Policy Council thinks, that marriage is a legal institution that has been the same for thousands of years. I think, if anything, it's a wonderful example of how culture and politics and religion have changed and evolved over the years, and what our institutions are. Back to when what a first-year law student learns in law school, or the first family law class, that that a marriage is between a man and a woman, and it creates one unit, and that one is the man. That is what the legal basis. That is what we learned in law school as the legal basis, and because that was in fact legally what happened. You got married. Women had no property rights. They were not citizens. They couldn't enter into contracts. They couldn't make money. If they inherited money from their family, it became their husband's money. Of course, and the children were property too, and even if children made money, that was all the husband. So that was the basis many years ago. And of course, I'm not even going back to the religious institutions and how they evolved, and that they used to be not in support of marriage till they figured out how to help. But I'll leave that to the ministers here and the ministers who are so wonderfully working on this. Then we evolved to finally women being recognized as separate, as legal people, and with certain rights. And I remember, and it wasn't way back when. I remember when I started practicing law here, as Tom has revealed how long ago that is, that it was still, we did not have certain laws that protected women, and if you inherited money, it was all from your family, and it got put in your husband's name, you separated, it was all his. I mean, it was if you separated, if everything was in the husband's name, which it was back then, it was all the husband's. And so one of the first political things I was involved with in terms of women's issues was changing the law so that and creating what we have as a current law that was certainly more fair to women. So I remember the day when women did not have these kinds of rights. And then another prime example in the marriage context is, of course, interracial marriage, and how that used to be prohibited by almost every state in the country, and now we look back at that, as we will someday look back at gay marriage and say, I can't believe that we used to have laws about that. And I also look at, California was the first state that said, no, this is discrimination. You can't prohibit interracial marriage. And it took 25 years before the Supreme Court then said, agreed that that was unconstitutional, and therefore no state could have any law. So that took 25 years.